The next item I wanted to mention was the ZFS on Linux repo move / rename from ZFS on Linux to OpenZFS. I mentioned this at the conference last week during my talk. I actually tested this out. So using the GitHub like transfer ownership feature, and it seemed to work. It seemed to transfer all of the things that I could think to test, like issues, pull requests, the wiki, releases, labels, and it also forwards all the existing URLs. So if you're going to it with like the web browser and you click a link in your email or whatever, it'll forward it from the old, ZFS on Linux URL to the OpenZFS one, and also the if you have the Git remote set up to do your development, you can just keep like Git pulling from the old one. And you don't see, so it should be a total non-event for for people that are doing development. We're hoping to do this by the end of the year. If anybody has negative experience with using the GitHub transfer ownership, please let me know so we can figure out if there's any drawbacks that would impact us. And I'm planning to send out an email about this, so that the folks who weren't at the conference or didn't watch the talk can just be aware of this. I'll probably send that out this week, and then we'll make the change kind of as soon as Brian and I can coordinate on that.
Yeah. So hopefully I found the mute button.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. Awesome. So yeah, I've anecdotally had good experience with this in the past too. So I hope it is also going to be a non-event. I've talked to a couple people, and transitioning the repos was pretty smooth. I suspect there's bound to be gotchas, but we'll find those.
I couldn't find it either.
Yeah. So if there's nothing more on that, I'll circle back and talk about the increased version number real quick. So the work there was basically just to increase the minimum version to 3.10 on Linux.
There was one question on the chat. So Seth was asking if the OpenZFS mailing list will still be used or the ZOL ones will be used. The answer is yes. So we're going to keep all the existing ZOL resources, including the ZOL mailing list and IRC channel and whatnot. So those will still continue on with their names of ZFS on Linux. The idea being that those kind of serve the community of people using ZFS on Linux, and there's like separate mailing lists and communities around people that are using ZFS on FreeBSD, and those will continue. I suspect that there might need to be a little bit more kind of cross-monitoring among the developers, but the OpenZFS mailing list, I think, will continue to be kind of the canonical mailing list for discussing like development of new features, and we'll continue to keep that probably more developer focused, and keep the platform-specific ones like the ZOL mailing list more free-form, and people looking for help using ZFS or wondering if this is a bug or how do I do X, Y, and Z. Those will continue to be good resources for that.
Okay.
Cool. Yeah. So go ahead, Brian, on the minimum kernel version.
Yeah. So hopefully this is largely a non-event too. Mainly it's to help maintain the code repos, but we've increased the minimum kernel version that we support in ZFS Linux up to the 3.10 kernel from a 2.6.32 kernel, which is very, very old. The practical effect of this is that we support now back to CentOS or RHEL 7 effectively. So that's still the vast majority of distributions. We've only effectively dropped support for a couple of very old enterprise distributions. But it let us shed a lot of code from the repository for maintaining compatibility, which was really nice. But I doubt it will affect many people. It's also worth mentioning that This won't roll out until the next major ZFS release. So this will be OpenZFS 2.0 will drop support. So existing 0.7 and 0.8 releases will continue to build on the older kernels. So this is just going forward.
And I saw in your pull request that there was a net removal of 2,000 lines of code, which is
yeah. Mostly M4 macros.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. Any questions about that? All right, then I think that we have time to talk about issue trackers. So this is, I wanted to have kind of to get input from folks on, I don't know if it's, I don't know how big of a problem this is. That's part of what I want to get people's input on. But I noticed in several of the issues that have been filed against ZFS on Linux, sometimes, somebody will file an issue that's kind of like, I want feature X, or, please do this thing. Please release packages for this new operating system, or please fix this bug, or please add this feature, which is great. And then if that, if we aren't able to address that like soon enough by somebody's idea, then we tend to get a bunch of comments that are kind of the form where the kind of takeaway of the message is like, you guys suck, or your project sucks for not having done this work yet. And then there's a bunch of people that reply to those saying, no, you guys suck for whining about a bunch of volunteers not doing the work that you want them to do, like stop being ungrateful. And in my opinion, both of these types of messages kind of amount to bickering, and I think that it discourages people from participating in the community in general. Folks that might just like come across and be like, oh, like I also want to know when ZOL will support whatever, and I found this issue, and now I'm reading through it, and it's a bunch of people complaining and fighting, and I think that so I think that folks who see that have a negative experience with the community, and then I think that it can also discourage the people who might actually be the ones that might actually address the issue from dealing with it, because whenever they think about it and go look at it, it's like a bunch of negative comments. So that's kind of one problem in my mind. And another problem I think is that if you kind of want to know what the status is, or you want to help out, you see there's a whole bunch of, you have to read through like 12 pages of off-topic comments to figure out like, what is the current status and what is the next step that needs to be taken to push this forward. And that latter one kind of also applies to another class of comments, which I've also seen, which warm my heart, but are technically off topic, where people are saying like, they're very nicely and politely saying, hey, like, let's all calm down. Like, I really appreciate the work of the people that are going on in this community. I'd love to see this feature too. I'm glad that you're taking the time to do it the right way. And, I really, personally, like, it warms my heart to see that sentiment expressed. And as a contributor, it makes me feel encouraged to participate more. But it does, even those comments do contribute to, having just a lot of stuff to read through to get to the point of like, what's the whole, like, what is the actual technical holdup here? Like, what are we waiting for to move this forward? And is that something that I could help with? You know what I mean? So I guess I wanted to just open the discussion for what folks think. Like, is this a problem that we should try to address? Is it just something that is a fact of life for all open source communities? I mean, I've seen this in, it's not just OpenZFS, it's not just ZFS Linux, it's like other random unrelated communities that I participated in. You see the same things. So, should we bother trying to address this, or should we just ignore it? And if we do want to address it, like, I want to see if folks have ideas of how we might go about doing that.
If I could add one thing, I think kind of similar to this issue is not just on an individual post of like, about a single issue, but also we do have like a large number of unclosed issues. And I think that part of what happens is just that issues get like kind of lost in the backlog of things. And I think some things which maybe like we were waiting on something else to go in, and then now we could move forward on them, but we just kind of lost track of that ticket while we were waiting because it's kind of moved so far back. So I just wanted to add that, at least from my perspective.
Are you thinking that some of these messages that I might have kind of called off topic actually help to move the process forward because they bring the important issues to the forefront and that might otherwise be ignored? Is that what you're getting at, or did I miss your point?
Not necessarily. I just mean like, so for instance, like a couple months ago, I was looking through like the issues and just looking through the top one, and it occurred to me that I should probably at some point check for issues that have the word encryption in them. So I just searched through the thing, and I saw that I'd actually missed a bunch, and just kind of didn't like, and I had forgotten about them. Some of them I had gotten tagged on, some of them like I hadn't, but even the ones that I was tagged on, I just didn't even remember. And like I went back and added a couple of those fixes just because like it was like, oh yeah, that was waiting on this other thing, and now that's implemented. So now that's a no-brainer to add kind of thing, because the thing that it was waiting on was cleared up months ago, and we just forgot.
So go ahead.
I'm just saying it's less from like a community messaging thing and more just in terms of like us not losing things, yeah. I guess, perspective.
I think that, to some degree, if we did a better job of not losing track of things, then that might head off some of this problem because the work wouldn't get so, we wouldn't have so many issues that are people really want and yet we have not addressed yet. Right. And that's kind of, I think that is a problem, and I think we should try to solve that as well. I don't think that we're going to be able to solve that 100%. So I think it's still worth trying to think about like, what do we want to do, if anything, about this kind of negative discussion around the issue. But I totally agree that we could do a lot better, and that would help with the problem, yeah, a bunch. Brian, were you trying to get a word in there?
No, I wasn't actually, but I can see how what's happened in the past with a lot of the negative comments we see is it is exactly these issues that seem to have been neglected a long time and they've been lost track of. I would say those are probably the most common places I see that kind of thing.
Do you think that those are issues that we have accidentally ignored, and so the reminder is helpful, or are they issues that like, yeah, we know we need to do that, but we're waiting on X, or we're waiting for so-and-so to have time, and that's why it hasn't got done?
I do. Sorry, go ahead, Brian.
No, you go ahead first.
I do have like one example, which is kind of making things hard for me to think of. So the example I'm thinking of is ZFSN-R, and some of the interactions that has with raw sends. There's a issue out right now for that, which we've kind of I've talked about this with a number of people, and basically the conclusion we've came to is that it is very hard to solve that problem. But it definitely has kind of had this that kind of negative comments going on in it, because like the general idea that people want there makes sense, and it's just a matter of like it's pretty hard for us to actually deal with. And so at least in that case, I'm not 100% sure how we prevent that kind of those kinds of discussions without also just losing track of the issue and implementing something like, I know some repositories have like a bot that closes issues which just aren't talked about for a while, or something like that, but I'm not sure if that's what we want to do. That that seems like it's just ignoring problems instead of
Yeah.
instead of dealing with them.
Yeah.
Brian?
I would add that we've left a lot of these issues open because they do report real problems. They're just, a really narrow use case, or very few people see it, or that kind of thing. But it's legitimately a problem, right? And we've just never circled back to address this or that little problem. We also have a lot of issues open that are just for feature requests, nice to have things, right? That would be great if someone could get around to implement, but it's not on anybody's list of things to get done right away. So I think it's a lot of things like that.
Yeah, I think that in addition to those, though, there are ones where it's not, like, it is more of a feature request. So, for example, the two that I'm thinking of are the packages for the new versions of Enterprise Linux, which is like, it's not broken. You're just like asking us to do more work to support more stuff, right? Which is like, sure, that's a legitimate request. Or the SIMD stuff, right? Where those are both things that are, I think they're both things that are doable, and at least one of them we did complete the work for it.
Yeah.
It's not that like it's not like it's a bug that's obscure and we don't know how to fix it, or at least not yet. It's more of a feature request or something like that. But I think that in either case, like, what do you? So I guess maybe I'll start throwing out some potential solutions at this point, since nobody else has. So I mean, one potential solution is ignore, like, status quo. Just kind of ignore these messages. Another one would be to like try to respond to every message, even the impolite ones, and let people know, like, hey, like, this is basically reiterate the current status. Like, yes, we know that this is an issue. We agree that it is very severe, or we don't think it's very severe, or whatever. And we're looking for someone to work on it, or so-and-so is going to be working on it once they finish X, or we're waiting for this other thing to happen that's outside of the project. In any case, kind of like, every time somebody complains, be like, hey, we get what you're saying. Here's the current status, and maybe that would help to diffuse it a little bit by having help people to feel like their input is heard, and for them to also know what the status is. Another alternative might be to like hide all of those comments as off topic, so that they don't clutter up the messages and people from outside the community don't come and see them. It might not, I mean, people might still post just as many impolite messages, or maybe even more, because they don't like having the messages hidden. We can kind of combine the two solutions of like replying to every message with like, hey, we hear you, here's the status. But also, like, we don't want to clutter up the issue tracker with these kind of off-topic comments. So like, I'm going to hide your message, and I'm going to hide this response to it. So they get the email of our response to it, but then they also get the message of like, this is not really what we want to see in here, and we're hiding all those messages. Those are kind of a few ideas that I had. So do folks have thoughts on if any of those are good or bad ideas?
I think definitely giving people like a response can help to diffuse things for a little bit. I will not say that it has always completely diffused things, at least in the past, in my experience. But I think I think what's really frustrating, like, just as somebody who has reported issues on various GitHub pages is just reporting an issue and then never getting a response. Not seeing that anybody's talked about it, not seeing that anything has been done, or maybe it gets done, maybe it doesn't, but just the idea that you have no information is sometimes frustrating. So I do kind of like the idea that of at least responding to everybody in some capacity, at least with status. Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Other folks? Brian, I'm going to put you on the spot again.
Yeah. I would say that what we have been doing in the past is trying to respond to every issue, but logistically, there are a lot of comments that come in and a lot of open issues, and it takes a lot of time just to manage the tracker. I think having more people responsible for helping with that, particularly now that it's going to be an OpenZFS repo shared between the projects, could go a long way for that. And maybe that's sufficient. I will agree that once you post a comment saying, the current status of an issue, it gets stale pretty quick, right? You post a comment, say an issue isn't moving forward, and then 3 months go by or 6 months go by and we haven't looked at it, and people are frustrated again. So these things tend to bubble back to the surface. I don't know exactly the best way to handle that either. I think doing a better job of triaging the issue tracker and closing stuff out would help, but that is a lot of work.
Yeah, I think that we do an okay job of having some response to every issue. Mm-hmm. But we don't necessarily do a good job of responding to every comment. Especially when the comments are when the comments don't make you feel good. It's not it's okay, first I got to deal with my not feeling good before I write a response, so that I'm writing a polite response and whatnot. And it just takes time and effort to do that. Mm-hmm. So I think a lot of times it doesn't get done. But at least for me, I think it would be helpful to have some kind of, project consensus on this is what we're trying. This is the goal. This is what we're aiming for. And then that would kind of encourage me to try and do that, right? If the goal is, hey, when somebody posts a comment being like, hey, you guys suck for not doing this work, everybody else is supporting, enterprise Linux version 78 and you're not, at least I can feel okay, well, what I'm supposed to do is figure out the status, reply to them, and then at least I'll kind of know that I have the backing of the community leadership to do that, to put in kind of the effort to do that, as opposed to being would it help? Would it not help? What am I even supposed to do here? Should I just ignore this guy who kind of is trolling us,
Yeah.
All right. Well, so far, I'm not hearing any upvotes for hiding people's comments.
Yeah.
I'm hearing positive response to we should communicate more and better. Is that fair? A fair summary so far?
I would think so. It's the biggest problem, like Brian said, is the logistics of, how do we spend how can we respond to all of these and still have time to actually work on ZFS?
And also, how do we do this without, I don't know, you and Brian not just only responding to comments now, and that's your whole-time job?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think some of what Brian said makes sense, just trying to do the triage and the I don't know, cleaning up the bug tracker as much as possible. But I think, like Matt was saying, that'll only work if we can get more people working on that, because there's a lot of issues.
Yeah.
Just trying to read through all the open pull requests to get an idea of what different people are working on has been really hard to keep up with.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I think sometimes it also depends on the issue. For example, it has happened in the past where there's an issue being filed, let's say for the Metaslab layer or something like that, a panic that's happened around those code paths. And for example, Matt would, you would tell me like, hey, can you take a look at that sometimes? So I think maybe we could like do a better job of just kind of like going through the issues once in a while. And sometimes, if there's something that you have at least some experience on, or like similar reasons, you could just go and reply and do the triaging yourself. So I don't think it's just up to like Matt and Brian on that. I'm not saying that you have to reply to all of them, but just taking a look at least once in a while.
Also, I think the tagging stuff we have is pretty useful. Maybe we should look at how many people have access to apply tags to issues and pull requests. Maybe make that number bigger.
If you're volunteering, Alan, then I'm happy to add you to that list.
Yeah. Personally, I would love to see more people help take care of the issue tracker and pull requests and triage things. I think the more people we can get working on that, the better. And even going through old issues. I mean, I'm sure there are a ton of old issues that just aren't relevant anymore or were fixed and can be closed out, right? It just takes time to go through and do that.
Yeah, it might have been an ideal thing to do at the hackathon, actually. We've done it in FreeBSD before, is just get a small group of people and spend 60 seconds on each pull request, whether it's deciding to close it or assign someone to investigate it after we've gone through the list. And each person comes away with a short list of PRs to go look at and see if it's already been solved, or if there's something that can be done to move it forward, or who the right person to assign it to is.
Yeah, I think that the pull requests are less problematic than the issues, because
issues in FreeBSD are called PRs from before, problem report rather than pull request.
Okay.
Yeah.
Maybe we can organize something some weekday or weekend to just have a bunch of people go through it together, maybe on a Zoom call or something.
Yeah, maybe we have like a spin-off from this meeting or something.
Yeah, just try to pound through a bunch of them, at least get the current state to something manageable, and then we can try to keep up from there.
I think that would be really helpful. Would it make sense to revisit how things are organized in the tracker, either with GitHub projects or more labels or that kind of thing?
Yeah, I think as we looked at them, we might find more labels to be useful. And yeah, the new project stuff could be interesting. Some of the issues, maybe it just gets marked as stalled, and we know that we don't plan to make any progress on this anytime soon. Although maybe we decide to close. But
I think also possibly assign similar to like how the Linux kernel has sub-maintainers, have like certain issues where certain people are again, going back to the idea of how do we make sure that this isn't just one person answering all of the comments on GitHub, and that's their full-time job. Like maybe certain tags have certain, people who are, kind of, I guess, responsible for responding to comments within those tags or subsections.
Yeah, like is it I forget what we call it. What we called those tags, but there's like component, I think. So like component send receive, component encryption, component packaging. Those each could have an owner that is at least hopefully responsible for curating.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. GitHub does let you assign issues to people too. So you could, just assign the issues to those people, and then they'd have a list of things that they could work through, or at least be aware of the issues so we don't lose track of them, right?
Yeah. All right. Well, I think that was some good ideas came out of that discussion. I definitely like the idea of enlisting more people to help, like owning each of the components or something like that. Why don't we, Brian? Why don't we take this feedback and try to come up with like a proposal, and then we'll discuss that at the next meeting.
Yeah, sounds good.
Cool. So the next meeting will be in 4 weeks from today, December 10th at the same time. And I'll see you all then. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.